Hirsch.
Here.
Here. Jensen.
Here.
Thank you. Excuse me. Lagaki.
Here.
Mayaski.
I think he's absent and excused this week.
Okay. Payton.
Here.
Wozniak Scanlon.
Here.
Reeves.
Here.
Sherlucky.
Here.
Schumacher.
Here.
Butler.
Here.
Thank you. We have 10 alders present.
All right.
And we have Alder Hiley arriving shortly, I assume.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are certified of compliance with open meeting laws. We do not have anyone registered for public comment, so we'll go right to communications and presentations. Any communications from alders this evening? Hearing none. I have one communication. I just want to let the council know that city staff has been negotiating in good faith with the Fair Board to engineer and implement the Mant Park master plan that you all approved. Meetings at Mant Park during the fair and with our engineers have been described as productive and positive by the Fair Board president. Unfortunately, public comments and postings by the Fair Board members have included statements that are contrary to our conversations. If alders have any questions regarding Mant Park master plan or anything else, feel free to reach out to myself or Director Glynn. That's all I have. I know Finance Director Alinger has a number of communications.
And I don't anticipate being long on any of them. The first one, Crown Point Properties, or excuse me, Crown Court Properties, who is looking to buy the Stoughton Housing Authority Greenspire buildings, has submitted a grant for additional $5.5 million for solar panels, geothermal, new installation on top of all the other planned remodeling that they're doing. So just an FYI for you. Hopefully we're going to get that and be able to help out the residents there even more. Any questions on that topic? Okay. The accrued sick leave, a question came up at the last meeting. I've just put the copy of the policy in the packet. The numbers for general employees is up to 130 days or 1040 hours. Sworn officers get an additional amount for any amount over 1,250 hours at 50%. So that was adopted back in 21. Any questions on that? Okay. Powerhouse building, as you know, there was a conversation at the last meeting. The next morning I sent out a memo regarding that topic. I just included it here so it was public record so anybody could see that. I'll open up the floor to any questions anybody might have on that memo.
I have a question, Dave, regarding the memo and regarding when we set aside funds for a particular use. You said because it wasn't used and we didn't bring it back up, therefore it kind of got mixed up into things. So how do we ensure that when a council kind of sets aside or gives staff direction to get something done and money to do it, that it actually is done, or that it's brought back to city council to let us either delay it or determine it? I mean, do we have a process or policy with that? I just don't like these things falling through the cracks when we think that we make a decision and then it comes back that nothing was done.
The question timing is rather intriguing because we had the similar question come up on two different projects for Public Works today, one from calendar year 2020, one from calendar year 22, I believe it was. In order to follow the statutes, council has to take action to increase expenditures in the subsequent year. So in theory, just like I'm used to every other local government I've worked at, as part of the year end, there's a process saying, here, council, these are the amounts we wish to carry forward, and council votes on those. Just due to having a few other things on my plate, that hasn't happened, but we're getting there. The Personnel Committee is meeting tomorrow about a potential additional person for my office. That will definitely help out so that we have additional people. I understand where you're coming from, but I like making sure that we follow the Wisconsin statutes. So we got to correct our methodology to make sure we're doing it correct.
No, there's no like onus on you. I just want to know, because I think as a body, and this has come up not just with the building, but other things, that we think that when we approve things, that things will get done. And I guess perhaps at the end of the year, we do need to circle back and say, okay, this is what the council approved to get done, this didn't happen, and that we can make a plan going forward.
Correct. And what my predecessors have done in the past is they basically did these sort of things by Excel, which makes it or get lost quicker. The way I've changed the accounting, so we have budgets and line items in the actual general ledger, we can run a report, say March 15th, and see exactly what we've got left for everything, so that we can have a carry forward resolution in April or something like that.
That would be great, because I know the staff is overworked, and things fall through because there's so many decisions being made on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, that would be great with your new accounting, that we do have something like that come March, April, that we can take stock of what was agreed upon during CIP and budget, and where things stand, and how we need to prioritize based on what we had decided.
I agree, and one of the examples that was brought up today in the email exchange, that item from 2020, I did not research it, but if it was truly a debt issue, we're past the 3-year IRS limit, and the IRS rules would have required any remaining funds for that to go into debt service. Okay. So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind as we're working on it.
Oh, thank you for all your work, Dave.
Yeah, and this is something that we'll reiterate tomorrow. We're having our monthly leadership meeting, and we're going to talk mostly about the budget. And this is something that I think we can communicate to there, and have the department heads help us provide that check and balance. If it's RDA related, we're going to have to figure out if you're going to be the one that check and balances that one. But I think the other departments can work with Dave's team and communicate where they are, because sometimes things don't get purchased when we think they are based on availability, or we get a high bid, or capacity issues, create a delay or whatever, especially right now on vehicles. We're seeing that, of course. So we're going to have to, really almost, retrain ourselves when we get toward the end of the year, if we don't think we're going to get a project completed, to, decide whether or not that should go into the next year. Same thing if we run under budget on an item, we have those monies that we haven't spent, what happens to it? We have to figure out a process for that as well. In the past, if something didn't get done, they kind of stockpiled the money, and then eventually maybe they did the project, but it could be a few years later, as Dave mentioned, when it's being tracked on Excel and you have a change in leadership, it's really hard to make that transition. So having it into our BSNA software, I think, is a positive step, but it's really taken a lot of extra work in order for Dave to do that as well. So we appreciate those efforts.
Thank you.
No, and thanks, Dave. And I look forward to, it's always improving progress. And so, there's no finger pointing. I just like to know that we have a new policy going forward. So
I understand where you're coming from.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we used to eyeball those in, well, we would look at them in finance because we would see them in the spreadsheet, and then we'd always ask about them, like, all right, what's the status on this 2019 project or something like that? And then some of them would fall off, some of them would keep going forward, but it was easy to lose track of things then that way. But I think if we get,
Especially because you have to update the spreadsheet from the general ledger. If you
Right.
just use the general ledger, you don't have that concern.
yep, so we'll tighten all that up and then be able to keep track of it better.
All right. Do you have one more item?
Yep. Just communication, the debt issue 2023A, the documentation in front, or in the packet, is for $6.3 million in debt. Quarles and Brady is actually, our bond counsel is working on the language of the resolution. Those resolutions are usually 15 to 20 pages long. A lot of wording there. So we did not have that available for finance this evening. Finance elected to not take any action for recommendation because they wanted to see the actual language from Quarles and Brady. So this is kind of just a heads up for you, the dollar amount that we're looking to issue bonds for next week. It's going to be, and I'm forgetting the parameters resolution, which is something we did for the debt in '22, basically giving 2 employees at the city the right to, or the authority to accept the lowest bids. So, of course, we'll get the recommendation from Ellers and then go with that lowest bid unless they can say another reason why. But it's more informational only for you folks tonight. There's no action needed, but I'll open up the floor to any questions.
All right, seeing no questions, we'll move into our regular business. The first item is the consent agenda, and there's 4 items in there. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Jensen, is there a second?
Second.
Second by President Hirsch. Would anybody like anything in this consent agenda acted on separately? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That motion carries. Next couple items are reconsiderations. These are items that were discussed by the City Council. Is this something that you want to introduce, Dave, or
I guess I'll leave it brief. Both resolutions 128 and 129 passed unanimously. When it came to the policy, then there was some discussion as to the funding for the power buildings, so it was asked that these items be brought back for reconsideration. I don't know if there's anything I need to add between my comments from the last meeting as well as the memo I recently gave to the council.
so there's really no action required, or?
For 6 and 7, no action is required unless the committee wants to take action. Item number 8, resolution 130, no vote was taken last time.
Okay, so I guess I would leave it up to council members on what you want to do with these items. Are you okay with closing the fund and closing the policy and all that, or do you want to do something different?
Seems like the
I think this
clarification-
came up with the powerhouse.
I think it was, yeah. So with the clarification that we have about how we'll move forward with handling these within the accounting structure and moving these from, or carrying them forward from by a resolution into the next budget year, does that clear up the concerns about negating the policy? Or negating the fund, I mean?
I think so, as long as the powerhouse isn't left
Yeah.
hanging.
Yeah, I think what we did is we added that to the CIP.
Right.
Which
So-
we haven't voted on yet, but it'll be in there.
Yep, that's what I,
Yep.
so I know it's in the CIP, so we
Yep.
get
Saw it
there.
this morning, it's there. Well,
Yep,
there's-
good.
There's actually a couple things there. There's
Yeah.
the tuck pointing, and I think there's the
The
roof.
roof.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So then we can probably just go on to number 9 then, does that sound right?
Number
Okay,
8
Louis.
has not been voted
Yep.
on yet.
Number 8 is,
The R130.
oh, yep,
Yep.
thank you. Is a resolution 130 of 2023. So this one was here. Did it come through finance? Is that where it
It
came
did,
from?
yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Alderperson Schumacher.
R130 of 2023 is a repeal of city policy for scheduled building maintenance fund. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Peyton. Alderperson Schumacher.
Just to, as the, change the accounting structure on the way that some of these funds are, so this is in line with how we've been gradually aligning all the funds in there and getting rid of these little pools of money instead, and kind of cleaning up the account numbers in it. But with the other discussion of that, we'll get a policy put forward about these projects that span year over year and how we're going to handle those.
Okay, anything you want to add, Dave?
The Finance Committee members know that this has been one of the future items on the finance agenda for probably a year.
Okay. Any questions or comments from alders? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. All right, now I'll get to item number 9, which is second reading, ordinance 26 from the Plan Commission. Alderperson Caravello.
Yes, thank you, sir. This is ordinance 26 of 2023, an ordinance amending the zoning classification of certified survey map lots 1, 2, 3, and outlot 1 at the southeast corner of US Highway 51 and County Highway B in the city of Stoughton, Wisconsin, and I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Schumacher. Anything you want to elaborate on tonight, Alderperson Caravello? I see Rodney has a map on the screen for you.
I think I'm going to let Rodney take it from here because
Well, this is an illustration you've seen before, but this is an illustration that shows the zoning classifications that are proposed in that acreage as identified. Rural holding is the bulk of the area that's undevelopable. The institutional lands is parks and open space and stormwater management. The planned office location on Lot 1 is a proposed headquarters for Stoughton Trailers, and then the rural holding section in Lot 2. Once we actually act on the CSM, we'll go into details about some of the conditions of the CSM, but this is the recommended and supported resolution for the zoning changes to these property areas.
All right.
Rodney, I have a question. With outlot 1, and maybe it's just because this is the actual kind of drawing versus kind of the conceptual map, but it seemed like the outlot 1 got smaller from the original concept map. I thought there was a lot more area in the northeast quadrant. Is that true, or is?
Yeah, there will be additional area that gets added to related to parks and open space.
Okay.
This really focuses on the primary stormwater management components on the southern portion, or phase 1, if you will.
Okay.
But yeah, lot 3, the very large piece that circles that area, can't be developed until such time as we work through a development plan for that, and that'll be one of the conditions I'll go over when we get to the CSM item.
Okay.
Sure.
I thought it just got smaller. I was like, am I losing my mind?
No. Anybody else have any questions or comments on the ordinance? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, that motion carried. Okay, next item is ordinance number 27 of 2023, and this one also came from the Plan Commission.
And as you said, this is ordinance 27, 2023, a plan development, general development plan for 211 South Water Street, Stoughton, Wisconsin, and I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Payton. All right, Alderperson Caravello.
And this is a request for a rezone from central business to planned development to create 18 residential apartment units at this location.
All right, Director Shield.
I'd like to offer one correction. I found a typo in the highlighted portion on the screen. The underlying zoning for this property is not zoned institutional. It's actually central business. So I can zoom into this, but in the actual ordinance, there's a need to make this correction. It was just discovered tonight, but wanted to highlight that need and would look for the people that made the motion in a second to acknowledge that change.
All right, is that acknowledged? Okay.
Sounds good. Acknowledged.
All right, and Candy, did you catch that?
Yes, I have that, thank you.
Okay, great. Anything else, President Hirsch?
Yes, Ronnie, I think on page 12, when they're showing the drawings, Unit H should be 2-bedroom, because they said that they have two bedrooms, 1 3-bedrooms, the rest kind of 1 bedroom and a loft. Is there a second 2-bedroom? I couldn't find it, and I'm assuming that it's Unit H.
So I can just speak to general terms related to that. The applicants are here and can speak more specifically. The rezoning request is not you're not acting on the configuration of the internal layout of the building. You're acting on the number of units that would be allowed within the facility. But that's not to say the makeup isn't something you've raised as a question. But the general development plan zoning is to accommodate the number of units within the building on this site.
So the number of units, not number of units plus the number of bedrooms.
Correct. It's
Okay.
a density.
But I just wanted to have that clarified too, whether there's actually two bedrooms versus.
There is two bedrooms on the second floor.
On the second floor?
Yep.
And so is it number H that is the second 2-bedroom versus?
I'm trying to find it.
The northeast side, and then the two bedrooms are right next to
Yep, so I think number H is supposed to be a 2-bedroom, not a 1-bedroom. Okay.
The applicant also provided a rendering of the exterior today that I was just going to put up on the screen of what they're kind of envisioning here for the exterior of the building, at least 2 sides of the structure. Again, not specifically related to the zoning, but certainly the character of what they're trying to accomplish there.
All right, any questions or comments on this one?
No, I think it's a great idea, and I like the idea. And anytime we can renovate an old building to make it look great and provide infill, I'm all for it.
All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
And are there any opposed? That motion carries. Ordinance 28 of 2023. This one also came from Plan Commission, Alderperson Caravello.
And this is ordinance 28 of 2023, an ordinance amending the zoning classification at 2605 Cromwell Court and the rear portion of 2500 Jackson Street in the city of Stoughton, Wisconsin, and I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Butler. Alderperson Caravello.
And this is amending the zoning from MR10 multifamily to planned business, and planned business to MR24 multifamily residential at that location. And
All right, anything you want to add, Director Shield?
I'm trying to get to an appropriate screen to show you. This is a screen that illustrates the zoning that's in place there. At this point, the northern property is zoned MR10. The existing lot 15, the rear portion of that is currently zoned planned business. With the certified survey map and the rezoning request, it's to make all of this area in red to the MR24, which will allow for 24 units per acre on that site. Happy to answer some questions. A multifamily was an intended use off of Cromwell Court. There's also some renderings in here that I think were illustrative related to the scale of the buildings in relationship to the other area, and I think I'll pull that up here. This 3D kind of illustration tries to provide you a visual scale of the height of the adjacent buildings in the area, looking from kind of the northwest to the southeast.
All right, and then Connor's here representing the developers. If there's any questions for him tonight, does anybody have additional questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And any opposed?
No.
One opposed, okay. That motion does carry. The next thing is new business, R136 of 2023. This was something that we talked about previously at the council, or at the Plan Commission. Alderperson Caravello.
And this is R136 of 2023. I'm looking at this, and it has, on the resolution, there's a date on the one that I'm looking at
Yeah, I've got, I'm sorry.
that has a
Yep, wrong
date
part of the
introduced
packet.
date.
There it is.
Wrong.
It's up there now.
Okay. Is that what? Okay. And this is from, because that's the August 26, 2023 date introduced.
That's
that's
the,
Probably the first reading. date.
Okay, the
Yep.
first reading, okay.
Yep.
Thanks. This is approving a conditional use permit request by Connor Kearney to allow multiple principal structures on a lot and more than 12 residential units per building at 2605 Cromwell Court and the rear portion of 2500 Jackson Street, Stoughton, Wisconsin, and I so move.
Is there a second? A second by Alderperson Payton. Alderperson Caravello.
And this is, again, just a conditional use permit for allow multiple buildings on that lot.
All right. City Attorney, I think, wants to kind of go through this process. It's a little bit different than our normal approval process.
Well, yeah,
Turn on the mic there. There you go.
I have a couple of questions, though, before I get into the discussion of the conditional use permits. Rodney, just looking at the application, the conditional use would allow for, says up to 4 principal structures. So is that the maximum number of principal structures then that would be allowed if the CUP is approved? I'm looking at the application and it says up to 4 principal structures. But there's nothing in the application, and it says greater than 12 units per building. Those are the two things in the application. So is there, in the narrative of the application, it says that they intend to have a two-story structures. But would they be limited to that, or would they be allowed to go higher than 2 stories? And then my second question is, what if any cap is there on density? Is that, you mentioned 24 units per acre in this zoning district. Are
That's
they
correct.
still limited to that? That's the upper limit?
That's the upper limit overall density.
Okay.
And the height limitations of the MR24 would prevail.
And those are, do you
I
have?
believe it's 40 feet. It would be a maximum height for that.
Okay. So just want to make sure I understood that. And then for the council, trying to look around to see how many of you have heard me give my little speech about conditional use permits. And I think there's some folks who maybe haven't heard it. if you haven't heard my speech about conditional use permits, like, raise your hand or something. There you go.
I'm ready for it.
All right. Okay. So most of the time when you're acting so for example, on the last item on the agenda was a proposed change in zoning. And that's a legislative decision that you are making where you have the authority and the discretion to base your decision on a pretty broad range of public policy considerations. And in other words, do what you think is in the best interest of the city based not only on the information that you may see in the application, but what you hear from your constituents and what your view is in terms of what the appropriate land use is. And so you have a lot of discretion when you're making a decision on a change in zoning. Conditional use permit is different. In the way the zoning code is set up, there are two kinds of uses. There are uses that are permitted as of right, and then there are things that are characterized as conditional uses. And that term conditional use applies anytime the zoning code says, well, you can maybe do this, but you need to come to us and we have to approve it first. And so the word, when I say conditional use, I'm really just referring to anything in the zoning code where the code says, well, this is legal, but you need permission, shall we say. A number of years ago, the legislature changed the statutes to make it clear that decisions on conditional use permits are not just broad policy decisions where you can simply do what you think the right thing is. Instead, it's a quasi-judicial decision. And you all as elected officials at this level of government will find yourself making quasi-judicial decisions from time to time. So for example, when somebody comes and applies for a license or a conditional use permit, or when you're revoking someone's license, those are all decisions that are required to be based on evidence that's presented to you, and then you apply that evidence to the standards in your ordinance or in the law and put on your judge's hat and decide, is the standard here met to authorize this or not? And so even if you might not want to approve something, if the evidence indicates that the standard is met, you're still required to approve it from a legal standpoint. The standard for approving a conditional use permit in our zoning code, it's referenced in the materials. It basically asks whether the proposed conditional use would have any adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood. Might not be using the exact language in the ordinance, but that's a fair characterization, I think, of what the standard is. Would this, if you approve this, would it have an adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood? Now you might ask, well, what is the evidence that you have before you to make a decision? And this is one of the things that's kind of something I've been hoping that we can get away from at some point, but we haven't yet. On these conditional use permits, it is the Plan Commission that actually holds a public hearing and develops the record. And then they make a recommendation and they send to you all their decision and minutes of the meeting. And so the record that you have to base your decision on tonight is what you have in the packet as the record that was developed at the Plan Commission. That would include the application that was submitted by the applicant here and any information about information that was presented at the public hearing. And I wasn't at the Plan Commission, so I don't know if there was any testimony from anyone other than the applicant, frankly. And Rodney, I apologize, I had trouble getting access to the packet tonight, so I'm not sure if the minutes reflect. Was there any testimony in opposition at the Plan Commission?
I don't believe there's anyone that's registered to speak at all, in addition to the applicant.
Okay, so it appears that the only information in the record that you have before you to base your decision on is the application itself, given that there was no testimony presented at the hearing. And So that's the task before you, is to review the application, consider the standard, and decide whether the standard is met or not. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there are any questions.
All right, is that clear as mud? It's kind of a difficult process. It's something we're not used to. We'll have other examples that will come here regarding, a lot of times it'll be like a drive-through, for example, where we could put conditions on a drive-through, stack space, whatever. There may be something where, neighbors may come to the public hearing and speak on an item if they have concerns, and then hopefully they're working with the applicant to address some concerns. This particular area here, there's really no neighbors, so nobody showed up to the public hearing. Nobody was really concerned about it. I believe in the application, they've done some work on traffic analysis, so that was part of the evidence. What else is in there, Rodney, that I'm missing?
Well, their site plan, again, the applicant did actually speak, so there was testimony in addition to the application. The only other speaker was from the applicant side.
Go.
Go ahead, Alder Sherlucky.
When you were defining it as having an adverse effect to the surrounding neighborhood, is there a definition as to what that neighborhood is? I mean, I know right now, as the mayor said, there's not really neighbors to that neighborhood, but how far does that stretch, and do we have a definition for that?
The ordinance does not define that, I don't
Right,
believe.
we give a public notice, right, Rodney, to the neighbors?
But how far does that extend?
The public notice is published in the newspaper for all to read. It's directly mailed to all property owners within 300 feet of the property.
Which there was nobody.
But I wouldn't say nobody. There is the multifamily, there's senior housing. There are some ownership of some of the single-family lots. So I think that there was, it's not fully built out by no means, but there are other properties that are developed around it. Just not many residential ones.
In most cases, there's already an established neighborhood, and that's where we tend to get more feedback. In this particular case, the neighborhood is the hotel, the Kettle Park Senior Living, and maybe some of the lots that have been developed. Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I guess the one thing I would add to it is that it's MR24 zoning conventionally, but if without the conditional use permits, the max density on the lot would be like 12 units. So it's rather strange. You'd need an extremely small lot in order to make that work, which is part of the reason why we went with a general development plan initially, is that the conditional use just has, in a way, it's kind of like a general development plan. In order to achieve the density that, I guess in other municipalities, MR24 would allow you to just have by right zoning, you need a conditional use permit to have more than 12 units per building. And then I'd just like to kind of rely back on what the architectural renderings, the 3D renderings look like. By using 4 buildings, it matches the context better than having one larger 3-story building, or say we can do more than 12 units per building, but we only have one building and we have this giant U-shaped building in the whole site. By having 4 buildings, we can actually break it up a little bit better than kind of a monolith throughout the whole site. So it sounds, maybe it sounds a little bit scary that it is conditional use, but this really allows you to get to the potential of what MR24 means. I'll just stay up here in case there's any other questions.
All right. Are there any other questions about the process? Go ahead, President Hirsch.
Not necessarily about the process, but I guess there's, Rodney, and Connor, maybe, is there still only 24 units per acre? Are they following that, or are they asking for additional units per acre? That's where I was a little confused.
No, they're not asking for additional units per acre. 24 units, I believe the site is, in totality, I can pull up the CSM, but it allows for, I believe, up to 112 units approximately.
I think it's 117.
That could have been.
So
Based on
we're under
acreage.
MR24.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up? So, as I understood it, if with just the MR24 zoning and no conditional use permit, you could have that higher level of density, but you'd have to do it in one building. Is that what I'm hearing? You just have to have one building with.
No,
or
I
would
mean,
you
at
be-
that point, you would still need permission to do more than 12 units per.
So even, so you'd
You
still
need
be
one of
capped
the
at
two
12 units
conditions.
per building?
You would need
Okay.
one of the two conditions.
All right.
I don't know how you would ever achieve 24 units unless you had a half-acre lot. That would really be the only way you could do it. So I'm sort of surprised it doesn't come up more often, I guess, but.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess another question is, on the actual resolution, it says Plan Commission recommends approval on the agenda, 5-2, but on the resolution it said 7-0, so which is it?
So this was looked at twice, I believe, right? I believe it was the 7-0 at the Plan Commission on the CUP.
Well, I think there's actually two copies of the resolution in
The
there.
old one and the new one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess what I heard was at the, and maybe this is not correct, that the vote on the rezone was 7-0 and the vote on the CUP was 5-2 at the Plan Commission.
Yeah, and then there was
We may-
also the CSM.
We may
I
have
would
that.
agree
Right,
with
right,
that.
but
That's
on the
kind of what I
agenda,
remember.
it says 5-2 for R 136, but on the resolution itself, it says, Plan Commission recommends approval of 7-0. So I'm just questioning, which is it for R 136?
I think it was 5-2, if I remember right.
Yeah,
I would agree.
The minutes are in the packet. That is a typo. You can see the highlighted minutes are actually
No,
as part of
it's-
this packet
it's
item.
5-2.
5-2
All right, so then
on the
I'm just
CUP.
saying then that needs to be corrected.
Yep.
You're right.
And so on the resolution, and then I guess based on that it was actually 5-2, I was wondering, I know I was reading the minutes, but the two that voted against, if they're in this room, could you explain the rationale against voting against it?
My concern about this was the ingress egress generally for this capacity in this location with everything funneling out the Cromwell Court, and that being the only access point, although there is an emergency access point that is adjacent or through the hotel parking lot. But I just didn't think it was great planning as far as that aspect went.
And he didn't offer any conditions. He could have maybe offered a condition for that if he so chose,
Yeah.
right?
Well, theoretically, I mean, the conditions need to be related to addressing, an impact on the surrounding neighborhood that would be of concern here. Again, my concern is that we don't have much of a record. So I don't know
Right.
what testimony there was, if any, about the ingress-egress issue.
There was, I think, testimony from the applicant on the traffic analysis.
Yeah, we had the traffic analysis conducted showing that, the one access point would be sufficient to service the site. The emergency access was provided based on feedback from fire and rescue. But this is the one use related to that cul-de-sac. There are a half a dozen alley lots as well. And just looking around the community as well, there are other examples of multifamily projects on cul-de-sacs. So this wouldn't be a unique situation, and the entire north side of this property here has a stormwater outlot that'll never be developed. So the traffic study showed at a maximum, at max, rush hour traffic, you would have one car a minute, or maybe it was one car every 30 seconds or something like that. Granted, that's by the book, which is written before COVID, where more people work from home too. So their traffic analysis showed that this wouldn't have a negative effect on the neighborhood based on what they've been able to provide us.
I guess I have a different kind of question. Because it is kind of in this pocket, and my whole thing is, inclusivity, but also, how are you going to make sure that this isn't turned into a blighted community? I mean, how will it be managed so it doesn't turn into blight later on, which would negatively impact the rest of the neighborhood? Because a lot of times when multifamily developments are kind of shoved off into the corner, and there's not good care, it turns into a problem for police and fire and also the surrounding neighborhood. So is there a good management plan in place? And I know maybe this is later on, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there now so we can start thinking about to make sure that this is really going to be beneficial to our community.
Yeah, I guess a couple things on that. Even before there was the previous proposed multifamily at the end of this location, so similar to single family at the end of a cul-de-sac, multifamily at the end of a cul-de-sac can be viewed as a positive as well, where I have children, right? So if I had to choose between a multifamily on a busy street or at the end of a cul-de-sac, I would choose the cul-de-sac all day because there's less traffic and things like that. And then I guess getting some feedback from last week's meeting, we included a sidewalk connection through the True Hotel site. So it'll align with those sidewalks on the True site. You can see the number 3 on this map here. So that will allow people to walk directly through the True Hotel site, kind of like a downtown environment where you're walking past businesses all the time to get to grocery stores, commercial center, Quick Trip, all the good things. So I think that the pedestrian connection through the site helps a lot. The emergency access is another item, and then being at the end of a cul-de-sac can be an amenity. I guess the third thing or fourth thing there would be there's nothing that precludes us in the future from coming back if it really is an issue, because a bad site for us, we don't want to manage a site that has crime issues and things like that. By opening up pedestrian use of the emergency lane upon approval by True and potentially the municipality would provide more circulation through the site, which could be a way of addressing it. So just because it's emergency today doesn't mean it always has to be if we find that that's an issue. But I think the main thing is that it's kind of a nice location, being able to walk to amenities and be at the end of a cul-de-sac where you have some privacy.
Do the sidewalks also connect to Oak Opening and then to the park area, or how are they connected?
Right now we're showing 2 connections. One at the entrance where the red dots are, the red trees there. It's kind of showing an ornamental tree entry. So there'll be a sidewalk connection there. So that'll allow you to walk to Oak Opening, or there's also the Outlot Trail. That's kind of the lime green color. So that would allow you to walk down to Jackson Street or further down to the community park that will be on the southern end of the site there. So those are the 2 access points, one through the True Hotel site, and then the other pedestrian access that is onto Cromwell Court.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments on this one? Ben or Jean, anything from you guys? Don't want to forget you guys out in Zoom land. Everything okay?
Oh, good.
All right.
I'm good too, though my dog doesn't like the thunder.
We just heard it now.
No.
We didn't hear it till you said that, Gene.
Gene brought the thunder.
Okay. Hearing no questions or comments, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That motion carries. Thanks for being here, Connor. Next one is also related, R-137 of 2023. Alderperson Caravello.
And this is the certified survey map to combine the properties at 2605 Cromwell Court, Lot 27, and 2500 Jackson Street, rear portion of Lot 15, Kettle Park West, and I so move.
Is there a second? Second by Alderperson Jensen. Alderperson Caravello.
And this is just the certified survey map for the previous property we were discussing.
Any questions or comments on this one? President Hirsch.
Again, Alder Caravello, because it was a 4-2 approval on this, is there reasoning behind the 2 that were against it or disapproved it
Yeah.
that we should be aware of?
It was the same just my concern about the access point.
Okay.
And I don't know, Alder Majewski was the other, and I don't know if his was similar, if I don't recall if he had a different concern. I think it was pretty much
So
similar to mine.
I guess I have a question to you, Alder Caravello. What would it take for you to like this? Was it that widening the driveway into that area just because it's a cul-de-sac? I mean, what would, I guess, make you comfortable with this?
I would have preferred to have seen, you know, two actual, I mean, I know that there's other spots where we have something similar to this with that the ingress egress is sort of, you know, through one point, through one driveway. But to me, it just seemed like it would be better if there was some way to have made this work where there is access to this property through Jackson Street somehow, but not really doable at this point. But so I don't think there's anything really that could have been done to actually make this work optimally as far as I was concerned.
Then I have a follow-up question. For that egress, that driveway, is it a two-way driveway that two cars, car can go in, one car go out, so it's wide enough for two cars in either, you know, direction to come on?
That would be allowable, yes. They haven't submitted, they've got a draft site plan, but that's not what's before us. We're doing the rezoning. They have to
Okay.
bring the site plan back through the plan commission.
All right, then there's a hint to the person that's sitting in
That's
the
standard.
audience?
That's standard.
And to the plan commission as well.
To the plan commission?
I guess I'll just say, right now it's drawn at like 24 feet, which would be similar to like a drive aisle within a parking lot or something like that. Plenty of distance for two cars to pass or for a car to be parked and a fire truck to move around them. So it's 24 feet right now.
Okay, thank you.
In a follow-up response to your question, though, and I believe it was Rodney that pointed this out at the last plan commission meeting, I initially had, one of my concerns was the access through that bulb, you know, that's at Cromwell Court. And I'm pretty sure it was Rodney said that, you know, if somebody is pulling into this area and then realize like, oh, this isn't a through street, this is access to this development, this is not where I want to go, or that the bulb that's there kind of allows them to do a relatively easy U-turn to then scoot back out again, which is one thing that I didn't consider initially. So
Signage
little
going into
upside to
Cromwell
the
Court.
weird access.
No outlet.
Yeah, no outlet. Yeah.
All right, any other questions or concerns on this one? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. R138. Phil, you're the man tonight.
And this is R138 2023, resolution by the Common Council of the City of Stoughton conditionally approving a certified survey map of certain lands owned by STI Holdings Incorporated, and I so move.
Is there a second? Oh, okay. Wozak Scanlon on the second. Alderperson Caravello.
I have nothing. I mean, we spoke about this a couple of items ago, but I'll hand it off to Rodney. Anything else?
So the Plan Commission actually took action on this last night, and the reason I'm wanting to highlight one change they made, and that's highlighted here. Item 3 is one of the items that was removed as a requirement. As part of the comprehensive plan amendment, there was discussion about having Greenbrier Drive be a 100-foot wide right-of-way. The applicant made a case to reduce it to 90. The CSM as submitted is also a 90-foot wide right-of-way as drawn on Greenbrier Drive. The rationale that they provided was this roadway is anticipated to be a collector street. the city's ordinances require a collector to be a minimum of 80 feet of right-of-way. But this is being proposed as 90 feet, which would allow for a 10-foot wide shared use path behind the curb on the north side of Greenbrier, along with a 13 to 15-foot wide terrace on that side. And then on the south side of the roadway would be a 5-foot wide sidewalk with about an 8-foot wide terrace. So they're trying to provide some illustrative discussion as to why 100-foot wasn't as necessary here. In addition, they highlighted the fact that, and I'll get to the screen here, they identified the fact that the adjacent lands to the north, much of which is either the park-like setting for Outlot 1, which is the park and open space area, and also the headquarters, which is actually a planned office district area, that they anticipate that being quite well landscaped as well. So that was their justification. I think the applicants are also online and able to answer questions, but that was supported by the Plan Commission. So condition or item number 3 was removed from the resolution, or from the resolution, and therefore this would be the one you'd be acting on has item 3 cross-stricken from that. That's the one that came out of Plan Commission. Item 3 would be cross-stricken to allow for it to be 90 feet as shown on the CSM. We can go through all the conditions related to the CSM. There's a number of things that are highlighted in here, or not highlighted, that have to be accommodated before the certified survey map will actually be signed by the city. Many of these conditions are similar to what you see when we process a final plat. Final plat just happens to be a larger document, or a larger consortium of lots, but this is a pretty substantial size CSM. There's a fair amount of public improvements that need to be made, both in Greenbrier related to the street, utilities, stormwater management, and the like. This outlines the requirement to have a development agreement put in place and agreed to before we sign the plat. The zoning has to be put in place, which you just took action on. There's a deed restriction that has to be placed on Lot 2, and I'll get to Lot 2 again to show you that. I briefly touched on it. Lot 2 is the larger parcel on the south side of the CSM, as shown on the bottom of the page. It's an area in which we don't want to have it developed until such time there's been a development plan approved. But likewise, there is some street connections to the south. There's Oak Ridge Court, and there's also Black Oak Drive, which actually terminate at the property boundaries. And as part of the evaluation of how Lot 2 would be developed is to understand how that terminates. Those that maybe they extend into a cul-de-sac into Lot 2, maybe they're a pedestrian corridor, maybe they're just a utility easement, but nonetheless, that just requires further evaluation before any development could occur on Lot 2. Likewise, as I spoke to earlier, Lot 3 is the larger undeveloped parcel kind of surrounding the entire certified survey map area. Likewise, we're placing a deed restriction on that until there's a development plan that's approved by the city to allow for that area to be done in an orderly manner. One of the conditions also talks about consideration for additional right-of-way that might be necessary as part of that platting process along County Highway B and or 51. There may be additional right-of-way necessary to be dedicated, and that would be evaluated at the time Lot 3 would be considered for development. There is reference in the certified survey map resolution also indicating dedication for additional right-of-way near the Greenbrier and 51 corridor, and you actually can see that that's what you can't see, but that amendment in essence has been made already in the version that's in your packet. It just hasn't been completely verified. That's in a recognition of the underpass that's planned to be just to the north, or approximately where Street A is named here. That is about where the underpass would go under Highway 51. The additional right-of-way that we're helping to identify here would allow for that pedestrian sidewalk essentially to extend north to that underpass. without having to acquire additional right-of-way in the future for that. So just trying to identify items that we wanted to address up front. We think that the city attorney and I have worked to identify those items along with our consulting engineers. There's also reference to some CSM technicality items that were identified by our consulting engineer and are referenced as one of the attachments here and included in the CSM resolution. Again, we believe most of those have already been satisfied in the version you have here, but that condition is just there for us to be able to evaluate prior to signing the CSM.
Rodney, I have a question. When you were talking about the green bar, before you keep them, you said something about pedestrian or 10-foot path off the curb. Is that, you know, we're always looking for more bike trails that are connected to parks and to schools and all that. Is that actually a multi-use where it'd be bike and pedestrian, that it's wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic of both?
Yes.
Okay.
It's planned for 10-foot wide shared use path, and that's the standard we've been using in Stoughton for that type of activity.
Okay, and so that we plan to do that throughout that development?
Yeah, even internal, and more details would come forward, but as part of the area around the stormwater management areas and linking to the park area, of course, that's planned. They just had identified that specifically in this green bar corridor, so people understood how that right-of-way width would be utilized.
That's consistent with the width that we're currently paving on Virgin Lake Trail. That'll connect to. And,
Correct.
And just one other thing I would add is we have quarterly meetings with the DOT, and I know it's really not related to the certified survey map, but they're making pretty good progress on the design for the underpass and then the roundabout at B. So I just want to let the council know that those conversations continue.
Sure.
I guess I have an interesting question about roundabouts. So thanks for bringing it up, Tim.
Geez. Sorry, I did know.
So general question is, why prefer in this case a roundabout? Is it because of the underpass and not any other type of traffic management? Because then you have this roundabout, and if you put one at B and 51, then you're looking at 6 right on the way to Main Street, in within 3 or 4 miles, maybe even a stretch?
Aren't we learning to love them yet?
I'm not from Wisconsin, so this is a very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, just
traffic.
imagine being on a ski hill and you're going over moguls.
That's it.
Right, if you haven't visited Mount Horeb yet, there's like quite a few of them.
So we're not going to be near the world record. Okay.
By no means.
No, on the meeting today, what did they say? Wisconsin was #1 or #2. You weren't on that meeting. #1 in roundabouts in the country. That was on the League of Municipality meeting today. But Florida is disputing that.
Of course they are.
So, yeah. But yeah, you're right. The DOT has really, been aggressive putting in the roundabouts, and I think the idea is to keep traffic moving. On this particular one here, I think they're trying to give us multiple options in order to maneuver it, to make it safer and to keep traffic moving.
Yeah, so not to diminish the question, it's really one that's been asked and answered a little bit. The city actually went on record to provide direction to the DOT supporting the utilization of a roundabout at that location. But much along those lines, as part of the development of this site and the adjacent lands, there's a TIA that's been submitted to the DOT related to full build-out in this region. And the DOT is taking that into consideration as to how to potentially build out the roundabout as a full build-out, as opposed to what they'd originally planned to be that wouldn't have accommodated the full build-out. So we're trying to work with the DOT to, preempt reconstruction in the not-too-distant future by doing it all at once.
What do you mean by full build-out versus regular?
Yeah, so full build-out is full development. So the lands to the east, the Stoughton Trailers development, that 180 acres. You've got 51 west to the south west of this intersection, Likewise, you have anticipated development on the northwest corner of Rutland Dunn and 51 in the lands that are undeveloped now, some owned by Dvorak and some owned by others, but that area will ultimately develop as well. So there's been a traffic impact analysis done by the development team to help evaluate full build out of those areas and really look at the impacts on that specific intersection. And in trying to be, I'll call it productive to society and not having to reconstruct things, we're working with the DOT to try to do that as one-time construction as it's soon to be full build out.
So instead of having maybe 1 or 2 lanes, maybe you'll have 2 or 3 or something like that.
Yeah, probably 2 and possibly a bypass lane on some legs of that to allow for more prominent turning activities in some of those directions.
Because it'll be more cost effective to overbuild it now than it'll be to come back and redo it, is kind of the theory, which I think is a pretty refreshing approach.
I'll add, there was a fatal crash right at that intersection a few years ago.
You're correct. There was.
Spurred a lot of this, on the movement on this intersection.
Thank you. All right, any other roundabout questions before we go back to anything else you wanted to add, Rodney?
I was just going to highlight the fact that we're really taking action on this resolution as presented with item 3 deleted. That was a recommended motion out of the Plan Commission. So if the motioner and seconder understand and support that, that was the motion.
Okay, you guys are good with that?
Near one of the roundabouts, could we build like Big Ben in the Parliament so that you can go around it? Big Ben, kids, Parliament.
I'll let you design that one. Any questions about any of the other conditions? As Rodney mentioned, this is pretty standard, whether it's a survey map, or sometimes when we do developers agreements, Matt will have conditions built into that need to be met in order for them to move forward with their projects. That way we can make sure we have benchmarks to get things done. I think that was what we're trying to do. And there's really no misunderstanding what the expectations are for them and us. I don't know if the applicants have anything that they want to add if they're on there. I know they've been listening to us. Not hearing anything. One final time for questions or comments. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And are there any opposed? That motion carries. And I think that's all we had, isn't it? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion by Jensen, second by, was it Caravello? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Have a good night.